Hi everyone, welcome back to our September success series. This session is for the future CAMWIBers. We're going to be going through some top tips and advice for you incoming freshers. I'm Annie, I'm a second year land economist at Trinity Hall, and I'm here with Karishma, who's a law student at Oxford, and I'd let her introduce herself now.
Hi everyone, I'm a second year law student at the University of Oxford, Wadham College. I spent a lot of last year on virtual internships, and although they were virtual, it did give me a very good insight to the different law firms. So hopefully I'll be able to give you some advice on applying for first year schemes, also managing a virtual workload, and hopefully how to go back to normality.
Yeah, and just a bit of context, sorry, as to why we've got a bit of a weird recording setup. Karishma's currently having some building work done in her house, so we thought it's better to escape the noise of the drills and get to the car. But yeah, thank you so much for giving up your time to speak to us. Yeah, really excited for the conversation. So I've kind of picked out 3 areas and topics that I wish I'd known more about when I was an incoming fresher. And so these 3 things are kind of how to budget, how to manage the student finance, that kind of side of things. Secondly, how to actually achieve a healthy work-life balance, which can be very hard when you're going from school where everything's so structured, you've got lessons every hour, where to uni, where especially in a virtual kind of world, you can do anything whenever you want kind of thing. And then thirdly, how to get ahead in your first year with kind of career related bits and pieces. So firstly, starting with budgeting. Karishma, how did you manage your money and budget in your first year? Did you use like an app? Did you use spreadsheet? Kind of how did you manage that side of uni?
I did it quite a basic way. I just had a spreadsheet, and actually the spreadsheet I set up at home was quite useless. It was when I got there and one of my friends had a really good spreadsheet. She kind of like changed mine up a bit. But the main way I did it when I did leave home was work out firstly how I was going to cover my rent, which was with my loan, and then what I'd have left for like living costs. So I was lucky my parents did help me out a lot. So I had like everything that they gave me for my living costs, and it was quite easy from there just to work it out. So I split my living costs into like going out, which in a pandemic wasn't very much, but it is something that's obviously increased this year. Food and drink, both like cooking food, but also account for how many times you're going to get takeout or go out for dinner. And then I also had like general things and shopping as well, because like you don't just shop for food. So those are the main things I split it into. And what you'll find is you probably did miss something that's a bit more personal to you or something random. And as that crops up, just remember to add it to the spreadsheet. So like the one that I forgot was like my Spotify and Netflix. So slowly just add things in and do check your bank account, because that will tell you where your money's going. So a lot of us do want to ignore it, but do have a look at it, and it will help you plan and budget and everything like that.
So did you kind of each week, did you like at the end of the week, did you add up how much you kind of spent, or did you have like a set number you couldn't like exceed each week for each of those kind of different areas?
Other than for food, I mainly just had a rough area that I didn't want to exceed. And like if I did, I'd have a look and see like, is this something I'm going to be exceeding all the time, or was it a one-off? So like if it's a friend's birthday and you've exceeded it, that's okay. But if like all the time you're going to, then you need to kind of rebudget and see if you can actually like, afford to be doing that. But yeah, with the exception of food, I would always just have like a maximum spend, and then if I went over, just kind of reassess. I was quite lucky, maybe because of the pandemic, I didn't really go over, so I was kind of okay. Or yeah, so it kind of worked quite nicely in that sense. But yeah, I think if you do, I think it's just about monitoring it and then working out like how you can bring it down.
Yeah, exactly. Because last year I tried to do some really complex. Oh, I think you saw that. Yeah, I tried to do some really weird complex spreadsheet that just went out the window in the 3rd week. And so I think this year I'm going to kind of have like a more of a schedule where on a Sunday night I sit down and like look at what I've spent for the week and just add up the kind of totals for, as you say, like those different areas. So I think I went down into way too much detail. So that's hopefully my plan. And so yeah, I think splitting into different areas kind of really helps you, because it is quite overwhelming when you've got like this money and then you've got so many opportunities to go out and spend money. Trying to like work out how much you are spending is like, quite important.
Yeah, I think just to add on that, one of the best things I did like in second term, or for me 3rd term, because second term was at home, but you know what I mean, I started to like meal plan. And so I would work out like what I was going to eat when. So obviously it's easier in terms of when you go shopping. Because like if I was to go to Tesco's every single day, which I did do in first term pretty much, you're just you're just going to spend more because you're going to buy stuff you also don't need. Whereas I
Yeah.
found that if I was going to Tesco's and bought all of the big stuff that I needed and then only went back for the small things that like you do need to buy throughout the week, I just spent less. But also it meant that when I was a bit lazy and didn't want to cook, I would still cook because I had the ingredients in the fridge instead of like what happened in first time where I can't be bothered to cook. Okay, I'm going to walk to the shops and buy something, which I still did in third term, like when I was tired, but I did it less. I did it like a bit more of an acceptable amount rather than
Yeah.
first time, which was like itsu like 3-4 times a week.
Yeah, having like the organization to get all the food shop kind of done at the beginning or end of whenever you want to do it, I think can really help. And also like if you're in a flat where you've got other people who like similar foods to you, sharing meals could be really good for that kind of thing too. So if you are really busy one day, then your friend can cook for you, and then when they're really busy, you can cook for them, kind of thing. That kind of, I think I didn't do that last year because I was quite catered. But I know some people in other colleges that did, and they really enjoyed that and kind of helped bond them together as well. And from a budgeting perspective, obviously, if you're cooking for more people, I think it does, become more kind of efficient. So yeah, you mentioned how you've kind of changed from first term, but going into second year, are there any kind of dramatic changes in the way you budget or manage your money that you're going to do, or just kind of continue the
I think I'm going
spreadsheet?
to be learning again, to be honest, because I was relatively catered last year in the sense that I would, if I wanted to have catered dinner, I could go to hall, or like the equivalent of hall. It was takeaway because of COVID, but the same thing. This year I'm living kind of too far away to do that as I'm living out of college. So I will have to be cooking a lot more than I did. And I think that will mean like more budgeting is needed, although I think I'll actually end up spending less. Because hall for
Yeah,
us wasn't that cheap. But I think for me, because we're going out more, I'll need to like actually learn how much a night out costs in Oxford before I can actually start budgeting. And I think that's something I'd say for the freshers, like don't panic because I don't know. Like for me, I've never been out on a night out because of the pandemic, and I've never been out on a night out in Oxford in terms of like clubbing, drinks, and everything. So I can't actually budget until I've got there and tried it. So I think it's kind of just a wait and see kind of thing. Don't wait too long because then you may well find yourself in a not so fun position. But you will need to just test some stuff out, and it's trial and error.
yeah, totally agree. And also, like, don't be worried about how much you're necessarily spending, like, say, on Freshers Week, because like everyone kind of goes, like, spends a lot more on Freshers Week because you're going out most of the time, and it kind of does settle down into when it gets into term time. So don't like automatically think that once you've done 1 week that that's going to be your budgeting for the rest of the term. I think kind of wait until maybe week 3, kind of when everything's settled down, you've got a rough idea of how much you are spending on each night out and that kind of thing. Like looking at how much your whole food costs compared to how much it is to cook, kind of thing. Yeah, that's what I would totally agree. Like I don't know what a night out in Cambridge would actually cost. So yeah, hopefully going to improve my budgeting next year. And then moving on from that, kind of moving towards so obviously we've spoken about the life aspect of university, but managing that life aspect with the work aspect can be very hard. Like that's, I think, the thing I found hardest moving from school to uni. How did you kind of find that balance? Do you use a calendar that was like really structured, or did you like the kind of typical to-do list kind of thing? How did you find that balance?
I think the difficulty wasn't quite moving from school to uni. I think it's probably moving from like nothing. It's like school had sort of ended quite abruptly. And so I think my best advice would be for anyone that the thing that took me the longest was getting a good routine. I think once you get that, it's fine. Um, because in terms of your workload, it is harder, especially at Oxbridge. I think when you speak to other friends, don't expect it to be the same because you will be feeling more of a jump in the sense that the work is a much bigger jump, at least in my opinion and most of my friends' opinion. So I want to say it is just the way that it is. So do expect the jump, but also you should be prepared for it because you know it's coming. So it's all about having a routine so that you can try and stay as on top of it as possible. And speak to your friends and your course mates, because the thing is you are probably doing the exact same thing and making the same mistakes and feeling the same way. So even if they look like they're incredibly on it, they probably may be, but also they won't be as on it as it probably looks like they are, because it is just quite hard to be that on it that early on. So do speak to them, and it should make you feel a lot better. But routine is really important. So if you know you're not a morning person, don't force yourself to get up at 9 a.m. every day. If you know, like for me, I prefer to work in the evenings. I would wake up at like 9:30, but I wouldn't start working until like 10:30, 11, because I knew that it was useless for me to do that. But I'd get up and do like non-working things, like go to Tesco's or like tidy my bedroom sometimes. But definitely that is something I would say, like finding a routine that works for you. But do prioritize sleep, because I didn't do that much. And in the end, like by the end of term, they may be short terms, but if you're not prioritizing sleep at all, it's not a sustainable pattern. And I literally just fell asleep, basically, like to the point where it was quite hard to like wake me up, or for me to wake myself up and carry on. So it is important, just even if you have like 1 day a week. So for me, like by the end of second year, third term, I was like, okay, on Sundays, I'm just not going to bother waking up before brunch, which was at 11. So I'd literally wake up at 10:45 and go downstairs and eat my brunch, and then start my day. And even though I felt like I am starting my day so late, it meant that like any time throughout the week where I just hadn't slept very well, I was sort of giving myself a chance to catch up. So it is just finding things that worked for you, letting things fit into a routine of some form, and everything like that. But it is really important, in my opinion, to work in the backs as well, because I think if you know, okay, I'm going to be disciplined enough to work in the backs, you can cut yourself some slack during term, because the backs are so long, so you may as well take advantage of them.
Yeah, I totally agree with that, and especially the point that it's your routine. I think I, especially in the first term, was kind of drawn to what routines my friends were leading. So I have a friend that is a morning person, so she would be in the library at 9:30, and if I wasn't, I'd be like, oh my God, why am I not in the library? I think you know, like you've got your own way of working, and recognizing that and like using that to your own advantage is really important, not just being drawn into what your friends are doing. Is really really key. And I'm a library person, so I can't work in my room. That's just like a thing I can't do. But working out whether you are a library person, or maybe you can work in your room, or maybe you like a bit of both, or moving to a cafe. I think that kind of thing is really important for you to work out for yourself, not being drawn by others' kind of opinions. And also on that kind of, you mentioned at the beginning of that question, to speak to other people on your course is so important, because you're all doing the same reading, you're all doing the same essays. Sharing the workload for readings is, I would really recommend. If like you've got 10 papers to read for one essay, splitting it amongst you all is really important, so like you're not having to do all 10 when you guys are literally just doing the same work. I think it's really, I would recommend doing that. And I didn't do that enough in first year, and hopefully next year, because I just didn't meet all the people on my course, so it's quite hard to do. But yeah, I think that's a good point.
Yeah, I think the other thing, just to build on that, is you mentioned not working in your room. If you can't work in your room, I think it is really important that you find somewhere where you can work, especially because like this year, there is hopefully nothing to force you to just to stay in your room. So like with me, I worked in the libraries because I knew I hated working in my room. But actually by the end of the year, when I could work anywhere, I found that working in prep was my favorite thing, because I would motivate myself with coffees, which I know is really bad. I'm not telling anyone to feed their caffeine addiction, but I would be like, if you hit 1,000 words, you can have a new coffee. And then I would hit 1,000 words a lot quicker. So for me, I really liked it. And also like, I have noise cancelling on my headphones, so it wasn't too loud, but it also wasn't like awkwardly quiet, which sometimes I found like a library was. So when I was writing an essay, like I quite liked working in coffee shops, but when I was reading something that made zero sense, I would still go to the libraries. So it is about finding what works for you, but also even if you do like working in your room, I think that's really good, because it means that if you can't go to the library, it works in your favor or whatever. But also it's nice to break it up and like get out of your room. So do try and work outside your room as well, if you can, because I think it really helps.
Yeah, having that mix is, as you say, really important. Like if you, and also getting to that headspace that you associate going to prep with writing an essay is quite good. Whereas if you're in the like I remember I'd have some days where, because we had to book library spaces, so I'd have booked the same space for the whole day, and just it wasn't productive, because I'd be sitting in the same space in the library around the same people for X number of hours. It didn't mix up that kind of that work and kind of all blended into one kind of thing. So yeah, I would really recommend kind of mixing up your spaces throughout the day. And then leading on from that, do you have any kind of top study tips, especially for kind of virtual learning? Because I've just been told that my lectures for the first 4 weeks are going to still be online. And they're all going to, I think they're mostly going to be pre-recorded, which is quite hard to manage because it is literally like you can do your lecture whenever you want. You can make however many notes you want. Whereas in a normal lecture hall, you'd have an hour to write those lecture notes. You've got to listen, and if you miss something, it doesn't really matter. But I think in this kind of virtual world, we're all kind of quite hung up on the fact that, oh, I've got to write down every word, I've got to understand every single thing. Any tips on how to kind of manage that, or how to how you make your lecture notes, how that kind of works?
I mean, for me, a lot of my lectures I did kind of during the back, just because like they are optional at Oxford for law students. However, I think one of the most important things that we didn't do it very often, but I would definitely suggest it for incoming freshers, is we would like book a room in college and try and watch the lectures together. And then that way you still pause it. We did pause it, but we paused it a lot less because not everyone wanted to go pause every 2 seconds, which I will admit you do when you watch it yourself. And I think what that does is it kind of eases you into watching it live to some extent. But like if there is an emergency where you didn't understand something, or you genuinely need to pause it or rewind, like then you can just be like, pause, rewind, whatever, and go for it. And I think that would be a really nice way to do it, especially because it would encourage freshers to get to know their course mates. So that would be something I definitely think is quite good. The reason we actually did it wasn't for that reason. It was also to hold us accountable, because if we were meant to watch a lecture by ourselves and then watch lectures through like 2 or 3, like as a group, you actually have to watch the other lecture by yourself. So that was why we started doing it right at the end of term, just because we wanted less work over summer, to be frank. But it does work, and there's like a lot of advantages to that setup, which is something that I think I would probably actually choose out of all of the random methods we watched lectures with last year. I think that was my favorite of them. And it was relatively like nice to work with other people as well, other lawyers, and like see if they were understanding the topics and things like that. I think in terms of taking notes, it really depends on your lecturer, because some of them will give you really good handouts, which means you don't have to do a thing. In terms of your own notes, you kind of just augment theirs. Whereas others, you'll be sat there and you'll be like, okay, I need to take full notes of this. So what I would suggest is like having a look if the lecturer has a handout or slides before the lecture, so you can roughly work out how you want to take those notes. Because you may well want to just like annotate the slides, in which case maybe printing them off or downloading them to an iPad and like grabbing, if you have like an Apple Pencil sort of setup. Or it may be where you just add to their like Word document or handout. So having that beforehand, I think makes it a lot easier for you. And not just working out how you're going to take notes, but have at least a skim, if not a read of the lecture handout, so that you know, okay, this sounds hard, make sure I pay attention on this bit, or like this bit sounds easy, or easier, or I recognize it from the reading, so you know I won't have to take mundane amounts of notes. So I think that really helps.
Yeah, I totally agree with that. So for some of my lectures, all the handouts were on a PowerPoint, and I didn't want my kind of notes to be in like a PowerPoint format. So before each lecture, it only took like 20 minutes, but I'd copy and paste all the kind of words that were onto a Word doc. So then I could be working from a Word doc in the lecture. So working out like what format your handout notes will come in before that first lecture starts, I'd really, really recommend doing too, like leaning off of that. And then kind of moving from the academic side of university into kind of the career side, because I think I was kind of under the kind of misconception that you go to uni for 3 years, you have 3 years to think about your career and what you're going to do. You don't actually have to do anything when you're at uni. Quite a wrong impression to be under, if you want to kind of get ahead and kind of get on the best schemes. I think you really do sadly have to be thinking about it from kind of day one at uni, but not like intensely, even just chatting to other people, joining uni societies to find out more about kind of career areas is really important. So just you could give a quick kind of overview of what you did in first year and what you think helped, or maybe some things that weren't useful at all.
Yeah, of course. I think the first thing I did was I made a spreadsheet this time that actually worked. And I left the spreadsheet open on my laptop, which wasn't the best way. So actually I suggest like printing out, because I never actually looked at it, and I did miss some of the deadlines just because I hadn't seen it. Although I now look in hindsight and think that I knew the deadlines were there and just deliberately missed them because I had too much on. So it may well work fine for you. But I made the spreadsheet before I got to college, long before I got to college, and then sort of color coded it by importance of the law firm or like the time before the deadline like came up. So that was the way I did it. And I don't regret that. What I will say is people told me to apply broadly because I'm in my first year, which I stand by. But I think whenever you apply to a firm, sorry, you need to ask yourself the question, if I get this, A, will I be happy? And B, do I actually want to potentially work at this law firm? If the answer is no, obviously it was a bit harder for me because they were virtual, so I think they were a bit more draining. But sometimes you'd get them and you'd be like, do you know what? I've got so much work on. I don't know why I applied for this. And that's how you know that you kind of just did too many applications. So when you are applying, ask yourself if that's something you want. That's the first thing. The second thing I did was I kind of would apply just before the deadlines. So in the end, I actually altered the deadline dates of the most important firms and like said that they were a couple of days earlier than they were, so that I was never missing them. But in reality, I think what I would recommend is, say if you have an essay deadline on a Saturday, which is really odd, you shouldn't, but I did. So mine was that Saturday at 12 o'clock. I would like take a nap afterwards, eat lunch and nap. And then the rest of the evening before dinner, I would basically say, if there's any law firms I need to apply to, this is when I'm going to do it. And doing it that way kind of worked a lot better for me because it meant that I wasn't going, the deadline's tomorrow, I have uni work, but I'm going to apply to a law firm. It meant that I was able to like manage my time so much better. So that's something that I do recommend. In terms of other things, join law societies, join other societies. So even if you know, okay, I want to do law, join similar profession societies because you'll meet similar people, like-minded people to yourself, but also it means that you're not like closing anything off too early, which in my opinion, I think perhaps I did. Like I was so focused on law firms that I didn't apply for like any IB work or any really weird, but there was like this civil service thing that I wanted to do. And when I went to apply to it, it had actually like passed like the deadline just because I knew it existed, but wasn't that serious about it and hadn't put it on my spreadsheet. So you can't do everything, but I do think that like try and, in my opinion, get some more varied work experience because you're on your first year and you can't know for certain that you want to do law. And I think getting a variety is more important than saying having 12 law firms, which having 12 law firms may well be great, but you can't necessarily like tell the difference between all of them anyway. So just do your research, work out which ones you like, and then apply really like competitively to those ones and put a lot of effort into that application. That would be my best advice.
Yeah, I think that's really good advice, especially, I think some people do definitely come, just to like kind of explain, IB stands for investment banking. Some people definitely do come to Cambridge and like, I know I want to do this, this, and this, and I'm going to get this internship and this internship. And that's great, but don't be stressed out if you've got a friend that is like that and you are not like that at all. I think kind of everyone kind of works at their own pace. And like even if you don't do anything in your first year, but you're joining societies and meeting people, you don't necessarily have to do an internship. If you're working really hard in a society, that like can look just as good on a CV if you're like on a kind of committee position there. So if you don't know exactly what you want to do and don't want to kind of commit that much, or it gets too late and work is overwhelming, there are other ways to kind of improve your CV rather than just like the traditional internship route if that's kind of how you want to kind of play it. And are there any kind of good resources you would use for career related stuff? Like, are there any kind of wider than like Oxford kind of societies you are a member of, perhaps not just for law?
Yeah, of course. I mean, I can send you a list as well because I think it's a bit easier because someone will slip your mind. But in terms of like the resources I used the corporate law academy, like the website online, and then there's also the commercial law academy, which technically is paid for, but they have a free section too, which can be really good, and they offer some webinars. And although it's not quite a society, I think I can attribute like a lot of my success and understanding of the application process and of law firms to their free webinars, because without them, I feel like I would have really struggled with case studies and things like that. So in terms of prepping for that, the Commercial Law Academy or Jake Shogger, he has some books as well. I would say they were the best. I didn't have any societies outside of Oxford per se, just because I don't really think that they are that well advertised or properly exist. And also like there isn't necessarily time for it, but those are definitely the ones that I used. I know a lot of people read Chris Stokes's book, like All About the City. I didn't read it myself because I didn't have time, but things like that will inform you in terms of like commercial awareness and make it known to you. But the best society or group that I think you can use is just finding other commercial solicitors or aspiring commercial solicitors, or a group of aspiring whatever you want to be, and speak to them and learn from them. So for example, we would have like a really odd group where it was set up by one of my work experience providers, and we would just talk through news stories just before application season. So it's basically like commercial awareness prep. One way to do this, if you don't have someone setting up for you, is just through LinkedIn. So I think that's like a really good way of doing it. It's really easy. Like, you just send a connection request, and then you're sort of connected, and you can reach out to them in the future and have conversations. As long as you try and maintain those relationships, I think you can get a lot out of LinkedIn.
Yeah, leading on from that, are there any kind of LinkedIn kind of profile tips you'd recommend, like stuff you like think you should include in your bio, or how to, like, LinkedIn can be a very kind of scary form of, like, it is a kind of a social media, but you can't be relaxed on it, as it were. Are there any kind of tips for like the posts you make or things you like? Because obviously you don't want to be liking like everything. You don't want to be liking really basic things. You kind of drawing it down into your kind of niche can be quite tricky to find people to follow, etc.
When I started out, everyone I've connected to, I'd met in person, or I had like a personal conversation with them where I would be like, hi, obviously it's pandemic, we can't meet in person, but we have XYZ in common. I'd love to speak to you. And we probably would have arranged some kind of Zoom call. Since then, I'll admit that my LinkedIn profile has become a bit less personal. That's mainly because other people are reaching out to me. And like, I've not met them, and I'm not the one like controlling how much effort's being put in. But when I started out, like, that was really important to me, that my network was small and genuine. So that's the first thing. In terms of what I like, I'll be honest, I don't think twice. If I like something, I kind of just like it. Because the thing is, as long as you're not liking something that basically shouldn't be on LinkedIn, I don't think there's a problem. And I don't think you're going to be like, oh, this shouldn't be on LinkedIn, let me like the post. I genuinely just, a lot of people use LinkedIn to share their success stories. So I'm more than happy to like whatever post it is. I don't check LinkedIn every day in terms of like what people are posting. I just might scroll some notifications. But if I do, then I will just like whatever. But it is really important, or was really important for me, to keep that a bit smaller, a smaller network. In terms of what I post something that you actually want to share. Like, if you're posting it just so that people know you went to so and so firm, maybe it's not the best thing to do. But if you're posting it because you have at that firm and you want to genuinely thank the people who like hosted it, then yeah, why not? So I think that's one really important thing. And lastly, in terms of creating a profile, I would say focus on like genuinely what you're interested in. So on your application, on your profile, sorry, you have the opportunity to come across as you want. Like, there's no application form dictating how you're meant to do it. So my advice would be to do it exactly as you want. Think professional and smart, but in your bio, if you want to say something that you love doing, then yeah, go for that. Usually the first sentence is probably your university and aspiring career, like career aspirations. But other than that, I would say just keep it personal, keep it up to date is the only thing I will say. Like, very much keep it up to date. I just about managed to keep mine up to date, and literally, I mean, even if you're super busy, just update it and say, okay, I was at Allen and Overy first this week. Even if you can't put in the bullet points as to what you did, hopefully you've made notes elsewhere, but you just don't have the time to put it on LinkedIn. That's fine, but just keep it up to date, because you can always go back and see okay, I need to go through and add the details. But if you've totally forgotten to put it on there, that can now just slip your mind, and then it's not there. And I know, like, rather embarrassingly, but I actually prefer to update LinkedIn because I can do it from my phone wherever I am, rather than sitting there updating my CV. So now when I go to update my CV, I use my LinkedIn profile, which is why I would say it is really important to keep it up to date, even if it's not massive detail. It will help you later.
Obviously, there's a lot of freshers who perhaps haven't, made that LinkedIn profile yet. I think I would really recommend doing that before you start uni, if you can, and just putting, like, you might not even have like that much to put on there, but putting the basics, like what A-level grades you got, what uni you're going to start at, is really, really important, because then from then on you can, if you like get into a society, you can put your exposition in X society, and updating it as you go is, yeah, I would agree, really important. It makes it so much easier in the long run. I think this is like, that's a kind of key point with all of these things, and that there are so many little things you can do along the way in your like your career journey that will help you in the long run that perhaps you don't see. So like, yeah, that's kind of my LinkedIn advice as well, would be definitely to kind of keep up to date with it. And I would agree with your point on kind of keeping it, especially at the beginning, keeping it to just being your personal connections. Don't like trying to reach out to everyone and anyone, and also don't feel obliged to accept anyone and everyone just because they like request you. Doesn't mean you have to accept them, because meaningful connections are genuine, unless they've sent you a message to being like, oh, we're similar because, you know, we've done X, Y, and Z, like I'd really like to kind of make that connection with you. If they haven't kind of sent that personal message, I would tend not to accept them, just because I think like there's no point having them in your network if you don't actually know them. If they're not going to, like, if you're not going to help each other, like what's kind of the point? LinkedIn isn't like a massive numbers game where it's like you want to get the 500 plus connections sticker. I think remembering that can be like, no one expects you to have 500 plus connections when you're a 18-year-old just starting uni, you know. So yeah, keeping those personal connections is what I would also recommend. And yeah, I think that's kind of, we've covered everything that I wanted to know as an incoming fresher, would have wanted to know when I look back on it. Is there one final thing that you can think of that you wish you'd known when you were kind of starting uni, and with having like the hindsight to kind of look back on it all?
Yeah, I think it's that you can't finish a reading list and you shouldn't expect to. And I know that sounds like you will have had people tell you that, but I still didn't really believe it. And I think when I heard, oh, you won't finish a reading list, I still thought I would get a lot further through than I did. Maybe that's because I was a bit slow, but also a lot of people just didn't get through their reading lists. And it's kind of like Annie said, like, speak to people and share the workload. Maybe not from week one, because that's a bit weird and you might like, yeah, but from week two, like after you've all had a complaint about how nobody finished the reading list, then like it is a good excuse to do that. But genuinely, just remember that nobody finishes the reading list. You can't do it all, so don't try, because then you'll just have no chance at like a social life or a fun uni time. So yeah, make a note of what you haven't done. That's the only thing I would say. As long as you made a note of what you haven't done so that you can catch up later, I don't think you've done anything wrong. And actually, I think you're doing it right. Just make a note so that you can catch up. But then, yeah, do the best you can and have fun at the same time.
Yeah, exactly. I would really echo that. And if you're reading a paper and it's really boring and you don't think it's going to help you with your essay, don't read it, move on to the next one. Like, honestly, that you can kind of work out what you're interested in. I think, like, especially with my courses, that like a lot of my essays are quite broad, so I can kind of pick and choose, as it were. But yeah, like, don't be stressed out if you haven't finished it, or if you're finding the reading boring. Just move on, and also like find your own readings that are really niche that the lecturer hasn't read before, kind of thing, is like another kind of tip I'd recommend doing. But yeah, most of all, enjoy uni, have fun, find the balance definitely between work and life, because that can be easy to kind of forget that when everything is kind of on top of you. But yeah, thank you so much, Karishma, for all your tips and advice. It's been really useful, and yeah, thank you all for joining us.
No worries at all. Best of luck to everyone. And if you do have any questions, you can reach out on LinkedIn. But like Annie said, do personalize it. But no, seriously, if anyone has any questions, especially like with application questions in the coming application season, then do reach out.
Thank you so much. That's so kind. And thank you for giving up your time today. It's been really great to chat to you. So thank you so much.